Well, I mentioned in my update that we had our matzos, 3 boxes actually. We go through them. We like them, especially the wheat ones. I've mentioned that I found them at H-E-B, and I went into H-E-B. I didn't know exactly where they were, so I asked a young employee. He obviously worked there, had the shirt on, the red shirt and so on. I asked him where the Jewish matzos were. What are they? I forget what he said. He rattled off a couple things. I said, that's not what they are. I explained that they were like Passover crackers. I thought, maybe there's a Jewish section or something, and that would ring a bell, and well, that didn't help much. So I said, well, we'll help you find them. So we went back into a back room. He was going to consult somebody else, a fellow employee, and he came back out and didn't know anything more when he came back out than he did when he went in to try to find it out. So we went up and down the aisles, and he was rather puzzled about what are we looking for, and I was with him, and I kind of had an idea where you might find them, or at least what I was looking for, and I could spot it on the shelf. Sure enough, I found it. So here they are, and I pointed it out to him so he was aware in case somebody else was looking for them, or at least he knows he'd heard of it before. Well, in many respects, I guess it's understandable because matzos are not that well known, of course, by most people, but I think there's a lesson in that of and by itself for all of us to remember. We may not have a box of matzos at home, but we're certainly going to be having a different kind of diet, at least in part, this coming week. We're all involved in something about which others find strange or unordinary. This is just not what people are doing either today or this coming week. It's not what the majority of people are participating in. Let's go to a couple of scriptures. First, Luke chapter 12, verse 32. Luke 12:32. Just one thought as we begin to develop the lesson for today. God's people are said to be different. Now, that should come to our mind as we participate this week and maybe eat those dry cardboard matzos that we often do. God's people are said to be different. Luke chapter 12:32. Fear not, little flock. So that seems to be an indication that God's people would be small, they'd be little, they wouldn't be making all the impression to the rest of the world, at least down through the ages. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. One other in Acts chapter 26, Acts 26:24. Maybe we can bring this to mind as we partake of certain type of bread that most would find to be very strange and unusual. I don't know if you take your lunch to work or not. Others see you pulling that bread out, that dry matzo, and what exactly is that? Acts 26:24. The Apostle Paul here, it says, and as he thus spoke for himself, Paul defending himself before Festus, Festus said with a loud voice, this was his natural response. Most would think that as well, as this man did. They told him, do you have matzos? And he looked rather strange and puzzled. So Festus said with a loud voice, Paul, you're beside yourself. Paul was explaining fundamentals about God's plan, his way, his purpose. And he said, Paul, you're nuts. You're beside yourself. Much learning does make you mad. This is all very strange, very unusual. But he said, I'm not mad. It's anything but madness. What you're a part of is madness. I'm not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. I have an understanding. I have something that I'm speaking. You think it's strange, crazy, like I've lost my mind, because the rest of the world is doing something else. They don't hold to these values. We think about that, or should, as we partake of this bread. Let's go to Exodus chapter 12 as we begin. Exodus 12:1. What we do could not be more biblical compared to the holidays most keep. And of course, the false religions are hardly biblical. What we do could not be more biblically based. Exodus chapter 12 and verse 1 and 2, the Lord spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. So God establishes an order to the annual, we'll say, calendar and yearly cycle. Okay, we're starting here. This is going to be the beginning. So here's a reference to the calendar. Now, the calendar is still very much debated among different groups in the churches of God. And I'm not going to launch into that. Matter of fact, I've sort of been reluctant to launch into it for just a sermon, getting at all those details. We have a paper on it, and I think Mr. Franks was here. I think he took the time to do that. So I've not chosen to do that, and won't, of course, now. But we use the Jewish calendar. Now, the Jewish calendar has postponements, or you might say adjustments to the calendar, and certain rules that are followed in order for the calendar to be properly constructed. Some claim those postponements move the holy days. In other words, you miss it with this calendar, or it takes God's holy days and puts it somewhere it's not supposed to be. And that is not the case. That is not how the calendar works. The calendar establishes when holy days are proclaimed. You establish the calendar and then you proclaim the holy days based on the calendar and the instructions about that. It's not a matter that you're missing it somehow if you had the rules of the calendar are interjected. They establish the holy days when they are. The Jews believe they had authority to establish a calendar, and we recognize that. We accept that premise. There's no calendar in the Bible. There's not any step-by-step process of how the calendar works. God just said, well, this will be the beginning. He gave it to the Jews. They've established a calendar that works very well. In that calendar, you establish when the holy days come, according to as God has instructed you. It's a very accurate calendar. We all saw the full moon again last night, like we were supposed to have seen it. Now, sometimes somebody will say, "Well, why don't you keep Pentecost when the Jews do? If you're looking at the Jews, why don't you keep Pentecost when they do?" Well, Pentecost and keeping it is a matter of interpreting scriptures that give instruction. That's an interpretation issue. The calendar is not the same. It's not an interpretation. It's establishing a calendar, and no matter who would establish a calendar, there's always going to be certain questions about it, and we accept the Jewish one as the one that will establish the holy days, and that's why we're here today. Well, that's kind of condensing, a big story, but let's go to chapter 23 in Leviticus. Leviticus 23. So now we get into these feasts. Speak unto the children of Israel concerning the feasts of the Lord. So what we do is from the Bible, whether someone agrees with whether we should do it or not. At least that's where these come from. Verse 5. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we're beginning here today. And that feast is unto the Lord. In 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So we should cover the fundamental meaning of the days of unleavened bread, but there are a lot of aspects to it that we wouldn't be able to cover either in the sermonette or the sermon, but we'll get into some things. I want to give a lesson today that's sometimes overlooked with respect to the days of unleavened bread. If I were to ask, what is the theme of unleavened bread? What is the theme of unleavened bread? Most people would say, well, it's to put sin out of your lives. Put sin out of your lives. And nothing necessarily wrong with that, because it is a part of these days, and certainly that message is there. It's a valid application, but perhaps not a complete one, or the best one when you think about some of the symbolism that we're walking through. So let's go through the steps in thinking about one of the themes of this time of year. We were told before the Passover to examine ourselves. We're leading up to something, so we were told, well, take an assessment. Look into the Scriptures, do some reading, do some praying and fasting about it, and begin to contemplate. We're assessing ourselves. That was leading up to Passover. We were admonished then, of course, to repent of our sins before we took these symbols. But that was right and good. Repent of your sins. We were reminded of what sin was once again. I would like to interject Titus 2, verse 11 and 12. I think this is critical to this time of year. Titus 2, verse 11 and 12. We live in such a confused world, and especially if our young people are not alert, the message of society, the philosophy, the, let's say, the summary of what life is all about, and life's lessons are so upside down. They sound good and right, and everybody goes along with the flow. But here in Titus chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, for the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. Everyone will have the opportunity. It's going out to the world. And what does God's way teach? The way of salvation, teaching us that denying ungodliness. Well, what is that? How do you know what's godly and ungodly? You have a lot of different ideas today over some very fundamental basics of life. We're denying ungodliness, worldly lust. We should live soberly, righteously. What's that? What's righteousness? Who tells us? Who's decided on it? Well, you have to go back to God. Live soberly, righteously, godly in this present world, to keep ourselves unspotted. What's a spot? What determines what a spot is? How do you know? So we come back to those things. So we examine ourselves. We're about to take symbols. So we express remorse. We acknowledge to God our sins. Having this framework for life, a plan, a vision, a framework, a set of values is critical to mental health and stability and balance. You know what life is generally about? You have some parameters. Children need parameters. They need to have a sense in their home of love and restrictions, right and wrong. That's critical. It's what our society lacks so much anymore. So then we talked about Christ being the Passover so we can be forgiven our sins. We took the Passover symbols. We renewed the new covenant with God. We said it was a new beginning. We were refreshed. Today we feel clean. We feel renewed. We feel refreshed. We're going forward again. We feel accepted by God because of His promises. We're refreshed after this process. So would the focus during the days of unleavened bread be primarily putting out sin out of our lives, taking it and putting it out in that symbolism or that process? From a symbolism standpoint, we're supposed to have done that already. We've repented. We put it out. Now, obviously, we still have it, and there's still a process taking place. That's true. But we really aren't spending this week getting leavening out of our house. It's out. We don't do one day after the other, and we keep removing the leavening, unless we find it, which sometimes is the case. So it's already out. We're really doing something else. So unleavened bread, I think we can include this in the meaning of it. Unleavened bread is about living without sin. How do you live without sin? Now we've repented. We've confessed our sins. God's been faithful to forgive us. Now how do you live without it? Though we know we still have it, and that's always a lifelong process. We're avoiding leaven during this week. We're living without it. It's about partaking the bread of life. We're taking in a certain substance. We're partaking of a certain type of bread. Why are we fueling ourselves with that? Why are we taking that in? because that's a part of living without sin. Sin that we've symbolically placed out of our life. We live by the faith of Christ. Sin is obviously, when we do that, then sin is pushed out. So that's the process too. But in that sense, we're learning how to live a life without it as we fulfill this meaning today, at least part of it. So it's taking something in rather than putting something out. We're partaking of something, eating unleavened bread. If we ingest unleavened bread, we're ingesting the way of God. We'll avoid the leaven of sin. So what are some of the lessons then to rehearse as we eat unleavened bread this particular week? What are some of the lessons? Just two primary ones that I have for us here today. Point number one, we are eating a different kind of bread from everyone else. I mentioned that a little bit in the introduction. It's a sign that we live by different values, a different way of life. What are we doing here today? What are we doing this week? How many other people are doing that? Does it come from the Scriptures, or does it come from paganism, like the world's holidays? So we're not just a different church. We live by different values, a different way of life. The primary story at this time of year is Israel coming out of something. The primary story is them leaving something, being separate. Let's go to John chapter 8, verse 23. John chapter 8, verse 23. Two primary lessons for us to think of during this week, which is a unique week in our lives. We are eating a different kind of bread. Our homes are minus and without certain items that every home in America would have. Why don't we have it? What are we showing? What does it mean? What's been put out of our homes? Now what are we eating? Why are we doing that? Well, one of the things we should bring to mind every time we eat something unleavened this week is that we live by different values, a different way. We're different from other people. John chapter 8, verse 23, Jesus said unto them, "You're from beneath." Okay, some of you are decent people. You're fine as far as everyday life is concerned. You're oriented to this life. That's your orientation. You're from beneath. I'm all about what's above. You're of this world. I'm not of this world. I think differently. I live here. I live among you. Eat and drink, sleep, just like you do. But I'm not about here and now first and foremost. No, I had an occupation, had to make a living, apparently in the construction business of some type. But I'm not of this world, and that's what we're about. Chapter 18 of John, verse 36. John 18:36. Jesus answered, said, "My kingdom's not of this world." This is a critical mindset for God's people because we all get into everyday life, and there's concerns about everyday life. And it's not easy. It's been a threatening week weather-wise for many homes, here Houstonians and those in the church. So it's hard to have this. But Jesus said, "My kingdom's not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight?" We'd have a different reaction right now, so that I wouldn't be delivered. It'd be a struggle. It'd be a physical struggle. But now my kingdom is not about all of this. That's not how I think. He had a different orientation, as I mentioned. As we partake of this different diet this week, we live a different life. It underscores we're not of this world, first and foremost. It's a political season. We're not all emotionally involved. We watch it. You can't miss it. We have some that we prefer over others. We're involved in the issues. We get brought into some of the topics. Not many of them very reassuring, what we see taking place, but we're not emotionally involved to the degree that other fellow citizens are. We know there's a different purpose going on. All of these political happenings, we have a much larger perspective. We know why some of this is happening. We know where it's going. We don't get down into it. Though we live here, we're citizens. Sometimes have opinions, see things. Can't be removed from it totally. Colossians chapter 3, verse 1. Let's bring this lesson home this particular week as we eat this unleavened bread. We're not like everyone else, hopefully in a positive way. We represent something different. Most find it strange. That's okay. Festus thought Paul was mad. You're crazy. Colossians 3 and verse 1. If you then are risen with Christ, seek the things that are above. You mean only? Just be into religion 24 hours a day? Or spiritual things? No, it's talking about a priority. If you're risen with Christ, and we've now been risen once again, you might say, after Passover, seek the things that are above, primarily, first and foremost, where Christ sits on the right hand of God. Set your affection on the things above, not on the earth. First and foremost, that's what we learn. That's what we come back to this time of year. We have a definition of the good and evil. What's sin and what isn't. What's leaven and what is not leaven. Matthew 6, verse 25. Matthew 6, verse 25. Therefore I say unto you, here again a definition, the Sermon on the Mount, a fundamental definition of what are these people about? What's their life all about? Seem like ordinary people, neighbors, and fellow co-workers, family members. But Jesus said, I say unto you in Matthew 6:25, don't take any thought for your life. Obviously, he didn't mean to be reckless and foolhardy. You can find plenty of that on YouTube and various other programs. I think there's one program, what is it? The world's weirdest stunts, or they've got all kinds of the world's weirdest this or that, and some of the things that people do are absolutely insane. But he says, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, yet for your body, what you shall put on. Isn't not life more than meat, and the body more than raiment? Don't let that worry you the most. Seek first, in verse 35, the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Seek first the kingdom of God. You have a different focus. You're a part of a different body. Something's going on in your life, your mind, and mine that isn't ordinary, isn't what everybody else is doing. So when we're eating this different kind of bread, that should bring to our mind that just as that's so different, come into our home, they wouldn't find any leavening products. Find this other kind of bread. We're different. Not strange necessarily, but different, doing something different. Why are we doing that? Where did it come from? Well, right here, out of the Scriptures. That's what we're reminded of. All right, second point. One of the important things we learned during the days of unleavened bread is that we need something coming into our lives. We're eating a certain amount of unleavened bread on a daily basis. I think that's the best way to observe the feast. We've always said, well, you're not sinned if something happens and you don't. But to participate in the holy days, we would take in some unleavened bread as a part of that observance. And what it brings to our mind is that we need something coming into our lives. Something spiritual, something unleavened has to come in. This is how we live without sin. We've put it out, come to Passover, repented of it, God's forgiven. Now here we go again, kind of starting off. Doesn't take too long, unfortunately, for all of us as human beings to have something else. Well, we regret, shouldn't have said that, shouldn't be in this attitude, shouldn't be whatever, even by this time. But nonetheless, we're beginning anew, and now it's partake of something, so we live a life without that leaven, without that sin that we pushed out. Hebrews chapter 11. Here's the principle that brings this aspect out. Hebrews chapter 11, 24 and 25. By faith, that didn't come from him. By the faith that was supplied to him. Yes, he had to take some steps, but by faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. That was a choice he made. Want to keep it silent? Want to keep it unknown? Want all the things that Egypt has to offer you? No, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. Now, on this occasion, it wasn't Moses chose to come out of the pleasures of sin. He chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God rather than to accept that particular way of life. And he did that by his faith. Moses demonstrating how to live without sin. The choice that he made. He did it by faith. There was a power working in him, enabling him to do that. That's one of the themes of unleavened bread, as I'm bringing out here today. So he put on righteousness through something that he had in him, supplied to him. We partake of unleavened bread. We need something. We don't have the strength on our own. We can't be Christians on our own strength. Something has to come in. Something has to be supplied. Let me read a story to you and tie this into a lesson for us today. This is titled, Helping Kids Heal. It's by Catherine Martin, and she's from Evansville, Indiana. Helping Kids Heal. When a tornado ripped through the small town of Otwell, Indiana, in the month of May, back in 2006, Catherine Martin, she was 32, who lived 60 miles away in Evansville, couldn't get the news of it out of her mind. He was 60 miles away, but she just could not forget about it. Says, I kept thinking, those poor people, somebody's got to help them, she says. She knew firsthand what they were going through. 6 months earlier, in the middle of the night in November, the previous year, a tornado had struck her town, taking the lives of her 2-year-old son, CJ, her mother-in-law, and her grandmother-in-law. The three had been having a sleepover at her grandmother-in-law's mobile home. Catherine, her 3 other children, and her husband survived. It was the most terrible experience of my life, she says. That pain will never go away. And it broke my heart to think about what those other families were going through in Otwell, especially the children. We've had, of course, something not to this scale, but very powerful impact our community and families as well, and loss of life. So after learning of this, and of course she had the experience she did personally, so Catherine loaded her car with juice boxes, snacks, and toys, and drove to Otwell. I got to do something. She dropped off the items with the Red Cross, and as she was leaving, she saw a couple sorting through the wreckage of their home while their children watched. Catherine had a few toys left, so she stopped and offered to play with the kids for a while. Well, I'll play with your kids. I know you're trying to salvage whatever you can. I'll watch the kids. Well, the parents were so grateful that what I did for their children, she says. It really helped them. Well, on the drive back to Evansville, Catherine came up with an idea to even help more kids. She corralled family, friends, and neighbors and spent the next few months organizing homegrown fundraisers, carnivals, car washes, walks, runs. Finally, in August of that year, she unveiled CJ's Bus, a 35-foot school bus turned mobile playroom, stocked with bins of video games and DVDs, toys, crafts, books, and much more. The bus traveled to disaster-torn towns, giving the children there a safe place to play while their parents clean up, tend to paperwork, or simply take a break. I'll get this bus going. To Catherine and her team of 39 volunteers, some of them fellow tornado victims, it's just keeping it normal for the kids. So far, CJ's Bus has traveled to 3 states affected by tornadoes or floods, cheering up more than 756 children, ages 3 to 13. Exhausting as it is running the bus, in addition to working full-time as a township trustee, it's what Catherine feels she must do and was meant to do. On our 3rd day in Earl, Arkansas, after a tornado there, a little boy asked where I lived. Where do you live, lady? When I told him Indiana, he couldn't believe I'd come all that way to help his family. Honestly, I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else. Well, what a great story about wanting to help. Look at Luke chapter 11. Luke chapter 11, verse 9. In Luke 11 and verse 9, here is one of the things that Jesus told us, and we read on the Passover evening, about asking. Jesus said, I say unto you, ask and it shall be given you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asks will receive. When we ask in the context of God's will and His way and His purpose, and our orientation is the kingdom of God, He responds to that. But think about what He's saying. For everyone that asks receives, and he that seeks finds. To him that knocks it shall be opened. If a son shall ask bread of any of you that's a father, will he give him a stone? Or if he asks a fish, will he for a fish give him a serpent? If he asks an egg, will he offer him a scorpion? Well, hardly anybody would do anything like that. If then you, being evil, we being as carnal and selfish as we are, if we know how to do and give good gifts, and here was a lady that did, and there's many, many people in the world, and certainly many here that give good gifts. We know how to do that. Not that only God does. If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to them that ask Him? How much more? Here's a lady getting up a bus, feels sorry for the children, wants to help out the parents. How much more would God be willing to do that? People do know how to give good gifts. God said, ask, and it shall be given. He's desirous of giving good gifts. And we need those gifts, of course, as we take in unleavened bread. Well, where does this trait come from human beings? Where do they get that trait? Where did this come from? This lady felt like, I just want to do this. I have this compassion. It came from God. He originated it. He's the one that came up with it and put it in man. Now, it's a system of good and evil, so we're not always that way. Certainly plenty of people are not, but many people do give good gifts. How much more? Jesus acknowledged it. Well, if you being evil know how to give good gifts, how much more is the message? So let's look at Isaiah 55. We know that God gave His only begotten Son. God will care for His people. In Isaiah 55, we're partaking of something during unleavened bread, taking something in because we say we need something. We've got to have that. Isaiah 55, verse 1. It says, "Ho, everyone that thirsts," anybody thirsty, "come you to the waters, and he that," you don't need any money. You don't earn it. You're not going to pay for it. He says, "Come you and buy and eat. Yes, come buy wine and milk without money. I won't charge you." You know how to give good gifts. How much more does God want to give? He says, "Why do you spend money for that which is not bread?" Look at the world and what they're pursuing. A kind of bread that looks good. Well, maybe it doesn't even always look that good, the white bread. But a world that's going after a certain kind of bread, we're partaking of a different bread. Maybe it's not all that attractive. "Why do you spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which doesn't satisfy?" That's the world today, pursuing after things they don't satisfy. Youth are troubled. People are confused. We're pulling apart as a society, fighting each other. We're not unified. We're not cooperative. Now, some people still are, like we have the example that I've read to you. I'll read to you another one as well. "So why do you spread bread and your labor for that which satisfies not? Hearken diligently unto me. Eat that which is good." That's what we try to partake of. Eat that which is good. "Let your soul delight itself in fatness. Incline your ear. Come unto me. Hear, and your soul shall live. I'll make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David." That's what we're walking through. Part of a covenant. Partaking of things that are good. Things that satisfy the soul, that anchor the soul and the heart and the mind. Hebrews 4, verse 15. Hebrews 4:15. It says here in Hebrews 4:15, "For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin." So he understands. He realizes what we face as human beings, what it's like to be of the flesh. God gave us a high priest, wants to give good gifts, desirous as we are to give to our children. God is desirous of doing that for us. Just as that lady wanted to help the people in the storm. Here's another story from besides the lady that tried to help people in the storm. He just wanted to do that. God wants to give good gifts to mankind, but something's preventing it. Something's stopping him. Something's frustrating the love of God. We don't want that to happen with us. That's part of what we'll be learning this week. So let me read one more story, inspiring story. "I would die for you, fall on my sword for you, take a bullet, give you a kidney, Exaggeration and hyperbole are often used to describe one person's extreme devotion to another, but the line about the kidney happened to accurately describe Virginia Postrel, what she did for her friend Sally Sattel. Some of you may not be aware that we have a member of the congregation here that gave a kidney as well. But here's this individual, Virginia Postel. She did that for her friend, Sally Sattel. The two women are kindred spirits who've known each other for 15 years. Because Virginia lives in Dallas and Sally in Washington, D.C., they rarely get together and mostly communicate by email. Nevertheless, when Virginia heard that if Sally didn't get a kidney transplant soon, she'd be tethered to a dialysis machine 3 days a week, Virginia put herself in her friend's place and suffered along with her. What a noble thing. Where'd that come from? God created that. I don't know how directly he gave it to this lady, but human beings have that. There's a natural affection. We're comparing that with how much more does God want to do things. For someone who prizes her independence and freedom of movement as much as Sally does, dialysis would have been a prison sentence, wrote Virginia in Texas Monthly. I knew the chances of getting a cadaver kidney were low, although I didn't realize how truly minuscule. More than 66,000 Americans are on the waiting list for 6,700 or so cadaver kidneys. 10 times as many are needed. Just thinking about her situation made my heart race with empathetic panic. Virginia's husband wasn't thrilled with the idea of letting someone slice open his wife and take one of her kidneys. No, none of us would be too totally comfortable with that. Have our own concerns for our loved one. So Virginia's husband wasn't thrilled with the idea of letting someone slice open his wife, and only came around when she made clearly how determined she was to give Sally a kidney. The two women's blood types were compatible, but tests showed Virginia to be slightly anemic, so she had to eat iron-rich cereal for a week until her hemoglobin count met the minimum standard, and then they went ahead with the operation. Usually when someone is seriously ill, all you can do is lend moral support and maybe cook some meals or run a few errands, wrote Virginia. Nothing you do will make that person well. But if you donate a kidney, you can, with the help of a team of medical specialists, cure her. Who wouldn't want to do that? Well, what a wonderful attitude, to be willing to do that. It wouldn't be something that everybody would be able to call upon themselves to do. But the point being, it's back to Luke chapter 11, or at least a reference back to it. If you then know how, and people know how to do those things, if you know how to do that, how much more would God want to give good gifts, or the Holy Spirit? And that's what we all need, of course. If we're going to live a life without leaven, without sin, live a life and keep sin out, something has to be in us, come from somewhere. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 13. Proverbs chapter 13. Verse 25. The righteous eats to the satisfying of his soul. There's some kind of peace that comes from the Spirit of God. Something about the soul being satisfied. You don't have to be converted to experience it totally, as these individuals felt a certain satisfaction when they gave as they did to somebody else, whether it was with the bus or whether giving up, in that case, the kidney. Something satisfying the soul. Today's society and world, the soul is troubled. It's agitated. It's worried. It's fearful. It's confused. It's into thinking of self. It's blocking out even the things that would come naturally by applying some of God's ways. It leads to a youth that are very confused and wonder, well, what are the values? How do I approach life? The righteous eats to the satisfying of his soul. That's what we think about when we take in unleavened bread. I need things that satisfy my soul. What wars against the soul? Well, leaven. That has to stay out. The belly of the wicked shall want, searching for something. Empty, confused, might as well seek pleasure. Or go in the other direction. Look for drugs. Becoming more epidemic that young people, they're cutting themselves and harming themselves, hurting themselves because of how they've been treated, or the way somebody's made them feel, or what they think of themselves. God's plan can help with that. Now, we all need friends. And just as these individuals help, sometimes you need to talk to somebody, help somebody, physically be there for them, show them something, make them know that somebody cares. That means a lot. But of course, the fundamental spiritual things are at the foundation. So we have to put ourselves in a position where God can give us gifts. We have to put ourselves in the position where God can grant the gifts that we need, including the Holy Spirit, as he said. How much more would God want to give his Spirit? Well, who's he going to give it to? You have to put yourself in the position so then he can do that. We can't earn it. Can't do something that God owes it to us. That's not how it works. That'd be earning our salvation, earning God's grace. Well, what are some of the ways to do this? They're not necessarily new. One would be meditation. Let's look at Psalm 119, a couple verses here, Psalm 119. We've rejected a certain way of life. We've symbolically followed through on that because we've gotten certain products out of our home. Our house is swept. Our house is clean. Well, how's it going to stay that way? Well, now we're going to partake. We're going to learn to live a way without leaven. How do we do that? What's necessary? Well, here's one way. I don't have any particular order. In Psalm 119, this is David speaking, verse 15, I will meditate in your precepts, and I have respect unto your way. So we contemplate God's way. We think about it. Meditate on it. Analyze it. Weigh it in the light of things we see in society. Verse 23. Princes also did sit and speak against me, but your servant did meditate in your statutes. I meditated on God's way. We'll do that this week. Partake of this bread. We have a different lifestyle. We're avoiding things when we go to work, when we go to school. Well, we're staying away from leavening. It represents something. Then we partake of something, which means we need something coming into us. How can we ensure it comes in? Well, we're going to meditate. We're going to pray to God. We saw that back in Luke chapter 11. Let's go to Luke chapter 18. Luke 18. He spoke a parable unto them for this purpose and to this end, that men ought always to pray and not to faint. That gives God an avenue to provide the gifts. The Holy Spirit, as it said directly, how much more if we ask for that Spirit and that difference. And then he gives the parable, of course, and we won't go through all of that. Verse 6, the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge said. Shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him? Though sometimes we have to bear long, I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. There's things we can do in which God acts speedily. We can, besides prayer, of course, fast for a more focused purpose. I don't think we should just fast and set day and we're going to do that just without giving it, just say, as a habit. I think there should be specific things that we have in mind for that, why we're doing that. But fasting for more focused purpose in what we're doing and reaching God and giving Him that opportunity through that to speak to us in a special way. Fellowship with God's people, godly people. Important for young people to have good friends, a right outlook on life, a right purpose. Read God's Word. It's going to give God that opportunity. It'll allow Him to work in our lives as we partake of this unleavened bread. Do good works. These people were very much rewarded by the things that they were doing. That lady with that bottle, how fulfilling and satisfying. How much would God have blessed her? She wasn't called and converted, but how much would she have been blessed as the result of that? I'm sure God took note of what both individuals did. So we do good works. A lot of those have been happening here this past week as well, with all that's taking place. And then, as we said before, it says, ask. How much more would God give the Spirit of those that ask? You receive not because you ask not. So unleavened bread pictures Christ, the bread of life, living in us. We need to give God every opportunity to come live in us. Those were the final statements of Jesus. If I don't go, it's better for me to go, because then something will come and live in you personally. You don't need me with you physically for how many more years? I'll go and you'll have something living inside of you, a spirit. My Father and I will come and dwell in you. So we want to make that opportunity in any way that we can. We're taking physical bread. It's not just an exercise. Okay, we'll get rid of the leaven and we'll eat some of these crackers nobody likes, unless you put butter and jelly or something else on them. We'll go through ahead and do that, and then that's the exercise that we heard in the sermonette. Certainly more to all of this than that. So we're partaking of that to teach us something, to bring to mind something that has to come into our lives. God provided manna in the wilderness. Miraculous food. They didn't even have to do a whole lot but gather it. Just miraculous food. Jesus said, I'm the bread of life that came down for all of you. Colossians 1:27, a couple more thoughts. Colossians 1:27 as we launch into these days of unleavened bread. God wants to give us many good gifts. Colossians 1:27, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of His mystery. We're walking through a mystery. God living in someone. The riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. What's the world all about? Why are we called? How would you explain that to someone? What would you tell someone? Why are you called? What's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to come to know, to prove, to come to know the Creator God and to have a spiritual relationship with Him. Or as it says here, to have God live in us. That opens up understanding to a mystery. God worked through an ancient nation, brought them out of a captivity, out of Egypt, miraculously led them, fed them miraculously, provided for them, led them. Now there's a spiritual nation. Now we have a spirit in us. But it's the same lessons. Those things were set for our examples. Many of the same lessons, of course, for us today. Galatians chapter 2, Galatians 2, verse 20, final verse. Here is certainly in keeping with this days of unleavened bread, living a life without sin. How to live without sin. And as we do it, what's there we push out of the way as well. Galatians 2:20, I'm crucified with Christ. I've given up my life. I've accepted God's way. I've accepted the covenant, the symbols of the covenant. We were baptized, we confirmed that, so I've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I'm living, but how are we living? What kind of life are we living? What's in us? Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. The life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God. Something has come into me. The faith of God has been granted. So we don't just put out the leavening and then go about our business. We partake of unleavened bread as a lesson. It's how we live a life without sin. I live yet not I, but Christ lives in me. The life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me, gave himself for me. How much more would God want to give good gifts to his people? All we have to do is get in a position, we heard that in the sermonette, get in a position to where those gifts can be granted. We're following through a physical representation for 7 days, but it's vital, spiritual, eternal truths. So something has to be inside. It's what's missing in the world. We have to renew that. That's why we have these holy days every year. There are billions of hungry people in the world. And there are millions and billions of people that are full, but are hungry in the spirit, confused, hurting, being hurt on a daily basis, not knowing what to do, where to go. This week of our eating of unleavened bread shows that we are different. We're not special oven by ourselves. We've been called to something different. We adhere to that. We focus on what we need to focus on, the things that are above. We learn the lessons of which we've just rehearsed a few here this afternoon. We are citizens of a different kingdom than the world. That's what we're about. We're something that's coming in that satisfies our soul. The peace of God comes into us through God's Spirit. And leavening or sin robs that. It takes that from us. We want to learn to live a life without the leavening that we've put out. So we're citizens of a different kingdom than of this world. We eat unleavened bread to show something must come into our lives if we are to keep sin out. Have to be doing that. Among the things that I mentioned, serving and doing good works, certainly a part of it. God will provide our needs. He provided it for ancient Israel. Each and every time they needed it, and it was vital, He provided it. He will provide for us as well. So let's keep this feast of unleavened bread. Let's keep it with sincerity, in truth, and with the love of God and the absence of sin.